Chapter 664. 34 Chinese Net. In 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. When the Ni sect gathered the 27 holy sects to go to the Tianna sect, several days had passed in the world of Chuanxing Path. Su Li gradually figured out the life pattern of her adoptive mother and Duan Hongqian in their childhood. The Jin family was rich, but this small yard seemed to be forgotten by the Jin family. They lived a poor mortal life. Today was the day when she routinely went to the market to return the extra vegetables. It was also the only day when she was free every month. Her adoptive mother didn't seem to worry that she would get lost and let her go alone every time. Su Li guessed that her adoptive mother was likely to take this opportunity to observe her, so she didn't intend to show any abnormality. The Jin family seemed to be the top family in Fonglong City. Its mansion occupied an excellent location. Su Li saw the archway of the market not long after she went out. Rui Lane. She got information about this lane from the memory of Duan Hongqian in her childhood. It seemed to have a great origin, and the commission for trading was not much. Both mortals and practitioners liked to trade in the Rui Lane. The Rui Lane was divided into the East Lane and the West Lane, which were clearly separated by a red line on the ground. Su Li came to her stall and sat down according to her memory. She lined up the fresh vegetables in the cage and put the price on them. 2 copper coins for a bundle of vegetables. Her price was low in the whole market. In addition, the vegetables were extremely fresh, so she sold them very quickly every time. Her adoptive mother didn't care how much she sold them. For cultivators, what could a few copper coins do? She just took this opportunity to observe whether Su Li was abnormal. In just half an hour, the vegetable cage was empty, and Su Li got 60 copper coins. She strung the copper coins and took out 2 of them. Then she found the supervisor, who was taking a nap on the chair. "Lord, I'm here to pay the commission." Su Li spread out her palm. Before she reacted, the 2 copper coins were taken away. The supervisor of the market didn't raise his head and waved his hand impatiently. "How many times have I told you? Don't bother me if you don't get 1 tael of silver." "Got it." Su Li responded obediently and left quickly. The direction of her departure was not the small yard, but the lively market. Children should be playful. If she went back to the yard immediately, her adoptive mother would feel strange. Su Li bought a skewer of sugar-coated haws with the copper coins in her hand. She took a bite of hawthorn and strolled with the gourd skewer. Seeing this scene, disappointment flashed in the eyes of his adoptive mother, who had been observing in the dark. She turned around and left. She had had enough. Give her another year. If there are no abnormalities, his foster mother's eyes were filled with killing intent. She let out a cold snort and quickened her pace, her figure disappearing into the crowd. Su Li wandered aimlessly, but she was still thinking about the possibility of solving the situation quickly. Her cultivation had been stripped away the moment she entered this illusory realm. She was now a weak little girl who couldn't even defeat a strong adult. Using brute force to break out of this situation was not within his consideration. In that case, he could only fight with his wits. Fortunately, after her observation these days, she found that the cultivation system in this dreamland was similar to that in Qingshui Circle. Although practitioners in Jinan realm were strong, they were not without weaknesses. She couldn't reach the nascent soul realm, but as long as she could destroy her adoptive mother's vital parts, she might be able to kill her. But was his adoptive mother the only enemy? She couldn't be sure. For her, as long as her adoptive mother reacted for a moment, she could be crushed to death with 1 finger. Besides, no matter how strong the physical body of Jinan realm was, it was impossible for her to break through it with bare hands. She needed to prepare special fatal means. Means and timing. Su Li's heart was heavy. Then she took a deep breath and calmed herself down. At this moment, she needed to be calmer than usual, patiently waiting for the opportunity. "Old ancestor Tianxing, what's the matter?" In the main hall of Tianna's sect, the lord of the sect sat at the top. Feng Mu looked calm under his throne, but his heart was full of ups and downs. "I don't deserve your honor." Bai Xiu shook his head and smiled. "I don't like those who abandon the old masters and set up their own sections. If I hadn't predicted that your sect would be destroyed, I wouldn't have come here." "Old ancestor Tianxing, I respect you as a senior. Hearing this, the Lord of Tiana's sect lost his smile and looked cold. But you have to be respectful. Why can't I tell the truth? Bai Xiu's attitude didn't change at all, and his starry eyes were also cold. On the way here, I have been thinking about what I missed. Now I finally understand how a young man like you can lead the medium of witchcraft. Where is Feng Huaji? You. Hearing this, the Lord of Tiana's sect's expression changed dramatically. Feng Mu, who was standing aside, was at a loss. Medium of witchcraft? Feng Huaji, wasn't he the founder of Tiana's sect? According to what old ancestor Tianqing said, the founder was still alive? Seeing the reaction of the Lord of Tiana's sect, the grand elders of the holy sects who came with him understood and all looked cold. Tiana's sect really harbors evil intentions. Our Phoenix Dream sect has always admired your sect, but I didn't expect that we were wrong. The pressure from 27 grand elders of the holy sects was so great that when the Lord of Tiana's sect was in a panic, another old voice suddenly sounded in the main hall. Haha, as expected, at this time, nothing can be hidden from Tianqing Valley. Why are you angry with the junior? Miao He, bring him to see me. The Lord of Tiana's sect immediately breathed a sigh of relief and smiled again. He descended from the throne and turned a blind eye to Feng Mu's question. He just looked at Bai Xiu and said with a smile, Senior, please come with me. Bai Xiu asked the other grand elders of the holy sects to wait here and left the main hall alone. Feng Mu stared blankly at the back of the two, pursing his lips. Sure enough, my elder brother is hiding something from me. I was right that time. My elder brother came back. Uncle Chen, I don't understand why. The answer in his mind rang in time. He is probably protecting you. Sometimes it's not good to know too much. The truth is often the most unacceptable. In the dark hall, the blood-red veins flickered. Bai Xiu walked slowly into the hall and saw the black sarcophagus. After a moment of silence, he suddenly laughed. I didn't expect that I would see you again after more than 10,000 years. I still have 1 year left, but it seems that you are in a worse situation than me. Haha, Bai Xiu. A sneer came out of the black coffin. You are not qualified to criticize me. If it weren't for your brother, maybe the palace master wouldn't have died. Although you don't say it, you are atoning for your sins, right? Bai Xiu looked sullen. What about you, senior? Is it right for you to transform into a demon and want to refine an evildoer? I have never said that I represent the right path. That's just a hat imposed by the outside practitioners. The black coffin said quietly, an evildoer is too powerful and difficult to refine. The highest achievement of the secret skill of blood replacement is only Feng Yuan, and the second is Feng Mu. The blood of the two brothers returned to the ancient times. When they were born, they absorbed nearly half of the talents here, but they failed to open the door of evildoers. Bai Xiu's pupil shrank suddenly, and he couldn't help but step back a few steps. His face was full of horror. However, you are really crazy to experiment with your own children. I am not crazy, but sometimes if you want to get something, you must pay a sufficient price. The voice in the black coffin was calm. Although they failed, these two children are indeed the most dazzling geniuses of the Feng family. I bear all the negative karma, and they only need to enjoy the fruits of victory. But if they know that their talents are filled with the lives of countless people, are you sure they won't go crazy? Bai Xiu's voice was sad. If you bear the negative karma, how can they pass the test of their state of mind? You seem to have misunderstood something. The black coffin was silent for a moment, and suddenly chuckled. I never want to hide it. Feng Yuan has always known it, including here. Before he entered the reincarnation mirror, he was a frequent visitor. What? Bai Xiu's face changed instantly, and Feng Yuan's reticent face suddenly became a little distorted. Yes, but I don't know what stimulated him in the reincarnation mirror, and he even wanted to leave the sect. I can only tell him that if he left, I would shift the focus of training to his brother, so he stayed. Feng Huaji's tone was light, as if he was threatening two strangers, not his own children. Even so, Feng Yuan's cultivation progress still can't satisfy me. I let him go out to find his own chance, and turn my attention to the instrument hall. Just now, my new spiritual weapon has been successfully studied. Crack! A crisp sound rang in Bai Xiu's ears, and the black coffin opened a gap. Bai Xiu's face suddenly turned pale, and he was about to step forward to stop it, but he heard his knees plop on the ground, and he couldn't stand up. Crack, crack, crack. Boom! The cracks in the black coffin burst open at an unimaginable speed, and then a skinny, white-robed elder jumped out of the black coffin and stood beside him lightly. Tianqing Valley, you witnessed the destruction of Qingshui Palace. Now, I allow you to continue to witness how I, Feng Huaji, destroy the Life Palace. Boom! Feng Huaji waved his sleeves, and the stone hall suddenly exploded, turning into countless spots of spiritual light. They followed the dense, bloody veins underground and wanted to spread to the whole Qingshui circle. Bai Su knelt on the only intact slate, his body trembling and his face filled with horror. At this moment, he finally understood why, no matter how he calculated, he always saw the destruction of Tian's sect. Feng Huaji, became a great emperor in these 10,000 years. How could he resist the great emperor's decision? In an instant, the whole Qingshui circle was raging, and dark clouds were gathering. What happened? Many grand elders waiting in the hall only heard an explosion, and then saw the outside world suddenly darkened, and lightning flashed among the dark clouds. Oh no! Senior White must have failed. What should we do? As soon as the voice of Ancestor Phoenix stream died down, she saw the dense bloody veins on the ground lit up. Standing on it, she felt that there seemed to be something extra in her body, but she couldn't tell what it was. Feng Mu stared at the veins on the ground. Suddenly, he bent over and vomited blood, which soaked into the bloody veins and flowed away. Seeing this, Xiang Hua's pupil shrank, and he flashed to help Feng Mu, who was lying on the ground. What's wrong with you? Feng Mu shook his head blankly. It's just a little disgusting. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and saw the question in each other's eyes. Xiang Hua looked up at the sky outside, frowning. What on earth happened? Chapter 665. Remember in 1 second. 800 mail sign, /say, net wonderful pop-up window, free reading. In the gale, Feng Huaji's haggard face was expressionless, as calm as a pool of stagnant water. His snow-white hair fluttered behind him. He was waiting for the bloody veins to spread to the whole Qingshui circle. At this stage, if anyone wanted to stop him, he would not hold back. Senior. Bai Xiu knelt next to Feng Huaji, his hair disheveled, and he cut a sorry figure. He raised his head to look at Feng Huaji, starlight surging in his eyes. Do you know that I read my fortune? Do you know what I saw after the battle started? What? Feng Huaji seemed to be in a good mood as he continued Bai Xiu's words with a faint smile on his face. Did I win, or did I lose? Bai Xiu's eyes darkened. Tian's sect destroy. Oh! Feng Huaji nodded indifferently, then turned to look at the serious Bai Xiu and asked, So what? What I'm asking you is, did I win or lose? Didn't you see it? Bai Xiu's expression turned dull. He didn't even care about the Tian's sect. Feng Huaji had really gone mad. Lord Fate Ancestor, something bad has happened. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine hurried in from outside the hall, looking shocked and angry. There was an explosion in Tian's sect just now, and blood-colored veins appeared on the ground. They are extending to the major regions of Qingshui Circle. Bai Ming turned around and pointed at the golden pagoda. I know. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine looked at the picture in the small golden tower and saw that the blood veins were moving forward like long snakes, eroding several miles in less than a breath. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was terrified. According to this speed, the entire Qingshui circle will be occupied by the blood-colored veins in less than 3 months. My lord, how can we stop it? Stop? Bai Mingyue moved away from the small golden pagoda and landed on the face of the master of Xingtian Shrine. The smile was still there. Why do you want to stop me? The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was stunned and blurted out. Isn't Tian's sect our enemy? You can leave. You don't have to worry about this. I know what I'm doing. Go get Chu Lianxing. Seeing that he had a well-thought-out plan, the chief of Xingtian Shrine was no longer flustered. After a salute, he left obediently. A moment later, Valley Master Ankwe came to the Life Palace Hall and stopped in front of Bai Ming. He bowed his head and said respectfully, "Chu Lianqing greets Fate Ancestor." Bai Ming nodded. "How are your injuries?" Valley Master Ankwe's expression became gloomy. He shook his head and said, "If it weren't for Sir, I'm afraid I would have become a dull puppet like those holy sect's grand elders. I have been studying Su Li's blood poison, but I still haven't found any way to solve it. I can't even suppress it. I'm really ashamed." Bai Ming nodded lightly. "If that's the case, put down your research first. I have something else for you to do." Chu Lianqing was taken aback and asked, "What is it?" "Go find Yin Lin. She will move with you. Just listen to her." Chu Lianqing's heart sank when he heard Bai Ming's words. After being poisoned, his status was immediately below Yin Lin. How realistic. Chu Lianqing nodded and said nothing. He believed in the law of the jungle. At this moment, his strength was affected by the blood poison, and he could not exert half of his usual strength. It was not suitable for him to rush ahead. After leaving the Life Palace Hall, Chu Lianqing came to Yin Lin's palace in the Life Palace. When he walked to the door, the maids of Huangxing Hall immediately saluted. "Valley Master has been waiting for a long time." Chu Lianqing laughed at himself and stepped into it. He saw Yin Lin standing in the center of the hall. She stood in front of the candlestick with her back to him. "You are here." Hearing the voice, Yin Lin turned around, and her beautiful young face was reflected in Chu Lianqing's eyes. Fate Ancestor should have said that what we have to do next is simple. Chu Lianqing hesitated for a moment when he heard the words, but he couldn't help asking, "Won't it cause a big disaster if we leave Tiana's sect alone?" Yin Lin's eyes flashed, and her tone became cold. "Valley Master Chu, you talk too much. Fate Ancestor doesn't like us to question his decision. If it was in the past, it would be fine, but now your life is in his hands." Sweat appeared on Chu Lianqing's forehead. After a moment of silence, he changed the previous question. "What are we going to do?" Your Ankwe Valley was originally the poison hall of Qingshui Palace. You have mastered the strange poison that can also work on practitioners in nature's test. Our Huangxing Hall is good at deduction, but our lethality is too weak. Fate Ancestor asked us to act together. Naturally, he used me as the lead to let you poison him. Chu Lianqing suddenly understood. Were they going to poison him secretly? Were you going to assassinate? Yin Lin smiled slightly. In Chu Lianqing's stunned eyes, she shook her head and said, "Not a person, but a sect." "A sect?" Chu Lianqing's voice rose a lot. "Is it Tiana's sect?" "But Master clearly said that we don't need to care about it." "It's Shengtian Shrine?" Yin Lin interrupted, but it made Chu Lianqing fall into greater shock. Shengtian Shrine could be said to be the most loyal sect to the Life Palace among the three-peak holy sections. In terms of the number and quality of disciples, it was above Ankwe Valley and Huangxing Hall. But now Fate Ancestor actually wanted to deal with Shengtian Shrine secretly? Why? He couldn't figure it out, but he didn't dare to ask Yin Lin. The relationship between him and Yin Lin was not as good as it seemed. "How can we figure out Lord Fate Ancestor's thoughts?" Yin Lin smiled sweetly. "Whatever he asks me to do, I will do my best to satisfy him. If he asks you to destroy Huangxing Hall, what will you do?" Chu Lianqing sneered, but Yin Lin nodded naturally. How can a mere sect be compared with the great wish of Fate Ancestor? Chu Lianqing's face tightened. Although he was not very familiar with Yin Lin before, Yin Lin at the moment was extremely strange to him. She didn't even care about her own sect. What kind of medicine did Bai Ming feed her? If Bai Ming asked him to destroy his own sect, then he would never do it. Chu Lianqing, you have to think clearly. The smile on Yin Lin's face was slightly restrained. Is Shengtian Shrine, which has little to do with you, more important or your life? I don't like to cooperate with idiots. You. Chu Lianqing's face changed slightly. He swung his sleeves and snorted coldly. I have no opinion on dealing with Shengtian Shrine. Hall Master Yin, you can arrange it as you see fit. Valley Master is indeed a sensible person. Yin Lin smiled again. Shengtian Shrine is not on guard against us. It is not difficult to take action. What is difficult is the follow-up steps. Since Su Li's poison is so powerful, Hall Master Chu should know what to do. Don't be in a hurry to kill her. It's not your turn to teach me about poisoning. Chu Lianqing dropped the sentence and turned to walk out of the hall. I'm going to prepare the poison. You'd better finish the deduction before I finish. Lin looked at his back, and her red lips were slightly hooked. A sense of pity appeared in her eyes. But only for a moment. This trace of pity disappeared. She walked to the hall of the Fate Palace and stopped beside Bai Ming. She stared at the rotating golden tower, put away the awe she pretended to show to outsiders, and chuckled. Chu Lianqing has gone to refine the poison. Good job. Bai Ming walked to one side and sat down softly. Through a water mirror, he looked at the haggard figure directly below the center of the dark clouds. When this matter is over, the second half of the ancient incantation book will be given to you, which contains the method of traveling in the starry sky. Even if you can't become an immortal because of the natural law, you can leave here, ascend to be a human immortal in the starry sky, and complete the transition of life level. Lin's eyes flashed, and she casually saluted. Then, thank you, my lord. You have worked for me for the longest time among all the servants. But as my confidant, how can I treat you badly? You are very special, different from those nonentities. Bai Ming leaned lazily on the soft couch, looked at Lin with a smile, and said with certainty, in addition to this matter, you have other things to ask me. I really can't hide anything from my lord. Lin smiled sweetly, sat in the corner of the soft couch, and gently massaged Bai Ming's shoulders. There is one thing I don't understand. It seems that I am in a good mood today. Ask me. Bai Ming's tone was gentle, and he looked at Lin as if he was looking at his beloved concubine. Chu Lianqing's poison really can't be detoxified? Lin blinked, and his tone was a little curious. Bai Ming narrowed his eyes and took a deep look at Lin, which made Lin's hair stand on end, and his heart beat slightly faster. Then he said leisurely, Chu Lianqing is not as stupid as Lin Kuan. His performance in the past 10,000 years is remarkable, and he can be regarded as an example. He's just a little worse than you. What reason do I have to lie to him? Su Li is just a pawn made by you. Does she have such great ability? Lin's eyes showed doubt. In this world, there are still variables that you can't control. I am not omniscient and omnipotent, and there are naturally things that I am not good at. Bai Ming chuckled, and his tone was slightly regretful. Anything, as long as it is related to the level of life, can't be said to be easy. Lin's eyes flashed, and she immediately thought of a past event, but she didn't show it. She pretended to be apologetic. I was rude. My lord's talent, even in the starry sky, must be unique. Bai Ming heard the praise, but he was not moved at all. He just said softly, you have stayed too long today. Lin hurriedly stood up, saluted, and smiled softly. I'm leaving. When Chu Lianqing returned to Anhui Valley, he fell into the holy place of the valley to make poison. When he passed by the Saint Hall, he didn't know why he, who had never cared about the saint, pushed open the door of the Saint Hall. The smell of alcohol filled the air with a faint stench. Chu Lianqing covered his nose with his cuff, frowned, and turned to leave, but he suddenly sensed endless sorrow from the depths of the shadow. Sorrow? Chu Lianqing's pupils suddenly shrank, and he subconsciously recalled the Qiyu evil skill. Sorrow, that was the fifth punishment. When did this kid, since the old ancestor is here? Why don't you come in? You're making me embarrassed by staying at the door. A cold voice came from the hall, and the sorrow in it made Chu Lianqing's scalp tingle slightly. However, he was also the grand elder of a sect, so he quickly calmed down and walked into the hall with a cold snort. In a pile of wine jars, he found Chu Qingning, who had a beard and looked like a beggar, with a long face. Bastard, you look so embarrassed. Do you want to lose the face of Anhui Valley? Chu Qingning raised his head drunkenly and laughed evilly. When did the old ancestor care about us juniors? I haven't practiced much recently, but I am very sensitive to emotional changes. Old ancestor, your heart seems to be in a mess. Chapter 666. Remember in 1 second. 800 mail sign small slash say, net wonderful pop-up window, free reading. Chu Lianqing's expression remained unchanged, but he was shocked. What was his cultivation? What was Chu Qingning's cultivation? How could he be seen through by a junior? Was the Qiyu evil skill really so powerful? When Chu Lianqing thought of this, he was suddenly stunned. He found out his background and found that Chu Qingning not only had a terrifying progress in the holy method, but also his cultivation had silently risen to the late stage of nature's test. In less than a month, he had crossed 4 realms of the holy method in a row. How could he directly cross a big realm and 3 small realms in one step? He was only 1 step away from the junior emperor. Moreover, if he hadn't suddenly come to take a look on a whim today, maybe in a few months, the 7 feathers evil technique would be perfected, and the holy son of Anke Valley would become the elder of Anke Valley. Chu Lianqing felt extremely absurd, but the fact was really in front of him, which made him silent for a while. This time, Fate Ancestor's plan failed again and again. His luck was too bad. He really didn't know whether Anke Valley would be affected if it went on like this. Seeing Chu Qingning drinking by himself again, Chu Lianqing was silent for a moment and suddenly said, Su Jiuzhou is Su Li. I saw it with my own eyes. Chu Qingning paused and then raised his head to drink a big mouthful of wine. He chuckled and said, Old ancestor, why do you tell me this? Aren't you surprised? Chu Lianqing was puzzled by Chu Qingning's attitude. Chu Qingning put down the wine jar and shook his head. I'm very surprised. In Xuedong and others don't believe their feelings, just like you, old ancestor. They have to see it with their own eyes to believe it. But I'm different. I feel right. If I think she is, she is. Hearing this, Chu Lianqing suddenly felt that he might have underestimated Chu Qingning too much. But it seemed that it was too late to repent now. If you were in my position, Chu Lianqing unconsciously changed his address. What would you do? Chu Qingning raised his head and blushed. He said lazily, It depends on what happened to you. You are willing to ask me, a junior, for advice. Chu Lianqing seemed to have foreseen that he would ask this question when he asked the question. He didn't hesitate and said directly, I was poisoned by Su Li and suppressed by Fate Ancestor. Fate Ancestor asked me to imitate Su Li's poison and poison everyone in Xingtian Shrine. The smile on Chu Qingning's face disappeared instantly, and he murmured, This is not good. Old ancestor, you can only attack Xingtian Shrine. Otherwise, Fate Ancestor will let Xingtian Shrine deal with our Anke Valley instead. Chu Lianqing's old face scrunched up. Is there a need to do this? Chu Qingning pointed to his head. Intuition. I believe in my intuition. If you really want me to give some arguments, in my opinion, Fate Ancestor never takes human life seriously. Although you are the same, he is different from you. I can't tell. Just like the sacred spirit blood calamity back then, Ancestor, you more or less felt a bit of pity and discomfort in your heart. But I believe that the Fate Ancestor will not feel this way. Why? Chu Lianqing pretended not to hear the sarcasm in Chu Qingning's words and continued to ask. Chu Qingning spread his hands and said straightforwardly, I don't know. As I said before, I believe in my intuition. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Chu Lianqing's eyelids twitched. He resisted the urge to slap the rude son in front of him and continued, What should I do? Just continue to poison. The death of the people of Xingtian Shrine is not regrettable. Chu Qingning looked indifferent. Chu Lianqing turned around and was about to leave, but he continued, Even if I die, I have to die clearly. Isn't it in vain? My sense of existence is very weak. I can go to Tianxing Valley to ask. You always say that Fate Ancestor will take us to the peak, but I don't think it's true. Since he secretly took charge of Qing Shui's circle, too many practitioners have died. Chu Lianqing was slightly shocked. He vaguely grasped something, but he felt that he didn't understand anything. He pondered for a moment, waved his sleeves to break the chain to prevent Chu Qingning from going crazy, and said in a low voice, Don't be found by anyone. Chu Qingning got up and cast a spell to sweep away the smell of alcohol. He bowed to Chu Lianqing, and his drooping eyebrows were full of sorrow. Thank you very much. A moment later, Chu Qingning appeared on the ground where the blood-colored veins spread. He looked bleak. He took a deep look at the direction of Huangxing Hall. He didn't go to the unique transmission matrix of Anhui Valley, nor to the transmission matrix used by ordinary casual practitioners. Instead, he left the holy region by relying on his body movement. He was transmitted to the Holy Snow region by the transmission matrix of a nearby large region. After that, he passed through several large regions before he came to Jiuzhou region. It took him a whole month to get there. When he set foot on the land of Jiuzhou region, he had already seen that the blood-colored veins spread here. He identified the direction of Ni sect and was about to hurry, but he was stopped by two figures. Seeing these two people, Chu Qingning's cold expression changed instantly, and his dead eyes flashed with light. "You are..." Luo Yichen stood in front of Mei Ruhan and looked at Chu Qingning. His usually cold face showed a smile, and his voice was gentle. "Although old friends reunite, you can't stare at my wife like this." Chu Qingning wanted to laugh, but his heart seemed to be drowned by the sudden sadness, and he couldn't laugh at all. Luo Yichen stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. "There's no need to say more. We have been living in seclusion, but the trouble Su Jiuzhou made was too big. Ruhan and I couldn't help it." When Chu Qingning heard this, a smile finally appeared. "Su Jiuzhou is Su Li. I was severely beaten by her." Mei Ruhan was not as haggard as before. Under the care of Luo Yichen, although her cultivation was still in Yuanying realm, her appearance was not as haggard and horrible as before. At this moment, hearing Chu Qingning's words, Mei Ruhan immediately remembered the illusion she saw inexplicably in Yushu sect. No, it was not an illusion. That tone, it was definitely her. Mei Ruhan couldn't help being excited, and her hands began to tremble again. Luo Yichen held her hand nervously, and his eyes darkened. He said to Chu Qingning, "Let's talk in another place." Chu Qingning glanced at Mei Ruhan, who was obviously not normal, and nodded gently. After a while, the three of them came to a very clean, thatched hut in the mountain forest. The grass and trees were still very fresh, and it should have been built not long ago. After coming to Jiuzhou region, Ruhan and I temporarily lived here. The nimbus here is scarce, and there will be no practitioners passing by. Luo Yichen cautiously closed the door, but did not set up a bounded domain, for fear of suspicion. Chu Qingning sat down and looked at Mei Ruhan, who had been trembling all the time. Then he turned his eyes to Luo Yichen, who looked normal. He couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you afraid that I have changed? The sadness in you won't lie." Luo Yichen smiled very lightly. "If you hadn't untied the knot in your heart, the progress of the evil skill of 7 moons would not have been so fast." "How do you know?" Chu Qingning didn't understand. Fortunately, Luo Yichen quickly gave him the answer. "Because I also practice this skill, and it has reached the consummation." Chu Qingning looked stiff, and then he heard Luo Yichen continued, "In terms of talent, you are not as good as me." Chu Qingning's eyebrows twitched, and he reluctantly raised the corner of his mouth. "You are more annoying than before. You are not bad either. If Su Jiuzhou hadn't caught you in advance, and you had successfully passed the second test, I would have killed you." Luo Yichen's expression returned to normal. "You also went to the Tianjia competition?" Chu Qingning was shocked. "Aren't you living in seclusion?" Luo Yichen replied expressionlessly, "I lied to you." Chu Qingning, "Don't tease, Qingning," Mei Ruhan finally said. Her voice was like a worn bellows, hoarse and unpleasant, which scared Chu Qingning. Chu Qingning immediately became serious when Madame said that. "Do you know the 1,000-faced demon girl?" "Who?" Chu Qingning was at a loss. For the past of Qing Shui's circle, he, who was born lazy, knew the least among the 4 holy children. Luo Yichen patted his forehead helplessly. "I knew it would be like this. Take us to Ni sect. Why don't you go by yourself?" "Of course, there is a reason." Chu Qingning didn't understand what was going on, but he still knocked on the gate of Ni sect. With his identity, Ni sect was naturally like facing a formidable enemy, so he was soon received by Hua Yin. During the period, Mei Ruhan passed a message to him, which made him vaguely understand the reason why these two people couldn't enter Ni sect. He divided half of his soul to help me expel the remnant soul, so his temperament changed a little. Chu Qingming understood and fell silent again. After a while, the three people came to the main hall of an ice sect. Hua Yin saw Mei Ruhan and smiled. Long time no see, Ruhan. Mei Ruhan was stunned and nodded gently. When Su Li was the holy girl of Yushu sect, she had a good relationship with Hua Yin, at least on the surface. Yi Chen helped me successfully get rid of the old soul, just recently. She touched her eyebrows and showed a shallow smile. The spell has failed, so I can say a lot of things. Hua Yin and Chu Qingming were a little confused after hearing it. Fortunately, Luo Yichen added on. Do you know the thousand-faced demon, Lord Hua? Hua Yan's eyes flashed. I've heard that she is the helper of Fate Ancestor. She can change into anyone's Numa, and Senior Bai has not found her. I used to be her disciple, and many secrets were sealed by her spell. As long as I said it, I would be tortured and die. Mei Ruhan's eyes were deep, until a new soul was born in the reincarnation mirror, and then I went crazy for 1,000 years because of the fight between the two souls. Until Yi Chen rescued me and cured me, I could completely get rid of her control. Hua Yin was shocked after hearing it. She didn't expect that Mei Ruhan had always been the disciple of the thousand-faced demon. What's the situation with Fong Ling? Mei Ruhan clenched her sleeves with both hands. After I went crazy, I became an abandoned pawn. Now I should be dead in the eyes of the thousand-faced demon. She needs a new pair of eyes to observe Yushu sect, so Fong Ling became a new pawn. Hua Yin thought of Fong Ling, who was still locked in the dungeon, and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Su Li didn't care about the old relationship and released her. At this moment, Mei Ruhan said again, Fong Ling didn't volunteer. She just felt guilty. In order to help me, she took the initiative to become the disciple of the thousand-faced demon. It hurt her. Luo Yichen held Mei Ruhan's cold hands tightly and said to Hua Yin, it was Fong Ling who contacted me that year. Chapter 667. Maze of Books in 1 second. Wonderful pop-up window, free reading. Hua Yin was surprised, but also understood. Su Li once went to the dungeon alone to see Fong Ling. Although she didn't release Fong Ling after she came out, all the punishments in the dungeon were removed, and she was simply imprisoned. Did Fong Ling take the risk to reveal something to Su Li at that time? Hua Yan's mind flashed for a moment, and her attention was soon attracted by Mei Ruhan's laughter. Can you tell me now? Who is the thousand-faced demoness? Mei Ruhan closed her eyes and sighed. I don't know who she is. She is beautiful and looks young. She always likes to wear a light yellow palace dress. Sometimes she stands in a pure white palace, and sometimes she stands in a luxurious golden hall. Sometimes there is an old woman in a gray robe walking around her who looks like an elder. Yin Lin. Chu Qingming interrupted Mei Ruhan's description, and his face was full of horror. Yin Lin, the master of Huangxing Hall. In this way, Huangxing Hall is also controlled. Hua Yan's face darkened, and she performed a hand seal. I'll send a message to the Exalted One and Patriarch Heavenstar. As soon as the Exalted One returns, he'll receive it immediately. Something has happened in the Milky Way sect, and the blood veins are spreading everywhere. I wonder how Senior White is doing in the Milky Way sect. The situation is becoming more and more chaotic. Luo Yichen's voice was heavy. He turned to Chu Qingming, who was anxious, and said, we can't act rashly to alert the enemy. Blind action will only hurt Yin Xuedong. You should understand. Chu Qingming's body shook slightly, and then he relaxed. He said with difficulty and sadness, in this war, I am not even a junior emperor. What can I do? Let's go to the reincarnation mirror. Hua Yin said solemnly, Chu Qingming, your practice method is not perfect. What you lack is time. As for Luo Yichen, your divine soul is damaged, and it will take a long time for you to recover. The reincarnation mirror can help you. Fang Yuan and others were also inside. Once the battle situation changes, I will immediately wake you up. Before that, we should prepare as much as we can to increase our chances of victory. How about that? The hall fell into a long silence. After a while, two responses were heard. All right. The stone palace of the Heavenly River sect was densely packed with crisscrossing blood-colored veins, like a red carpet covering the ground. A month had passed. Feng Huaji had waited for a long time, but the Life Palace had not sent anyone to stop him. Why? Why didn't anyone stop me? Bai Xiao, who had been forgiven and did not have to kneel, sat cross-legged on the side. He calmly said, "If this junior asks you to stop now, would you be willing?" "Of course not." Feng Huaji's eyes flickered. "I have painstakingly prepared for 10,000 years just for this day. Then there's nothing more to say." Bai Xiao sighed bitterly. "I only hope that you can let the grand elders of holy sects leave Tiana sect and leave a hope for Qingshui's circle. I can promise you." Feng Huaji nodded nonchalantly. "But if we let them go for nothing, what would happen to the Tiana sect? You have to give me a reason. You want information?" Bai Xiao was helpless. Feng Huaji was still obsessed with going about things the wrong way. In his opinion, no matter how much information he had, he would not be able to turn the situation around. Everything was already doomed. The fact that White Demon didn't attack meant that he was confident. At this moment, a message talisman flew out of the void, turned into a light that beside Bai Xiao's ear, and disappeared. Hearing Hua Yan's voice, Bai Xiao's face darkened again, and he whispered, "Yin Lin of Huangxing Hall is the thousand-faced demon girl." Feng Huaji's face changed slightly, and then he smiled with hatred and madness. "Very good. I am very satisfied with the information you gave me. I will let those grand elders of holy sects leave. What is your plan? What is the function of these bloody veins?" Looking at Feng Huaji's distorted face, Bai Xiao couldn't help but feel a chill on his back. He braced himself to ask. Feng Huaji stopped smiling, and he looked unfathomable. 2 months later, you will understand why I am so sure. It was a silent night. In the morning of the next day, the sun rose from the east, dispelling the chill in the small courtyard. Su Li got up early. Today was the day to go to the market in the middle of the month. Su Li was busy in the vegetable field until the basket was filled. Then she straightened up and wiped her sweat. She shouted to the house, "Mother, I am going to the market. I will be back before dark. Go ahead. Be careful on the way." The gentle words came from the house, as if she was really a kind adoptive mother. Su Li responded, turned around, and skipped away from the door of the small courtyard. A gloominess flashed through her clear eyes. A month had passed, but she still didn't get any opportunity to take advantage of it, which made her a little anxious. If she was delayed in the illusion for 6 years like last time, even if she broke through to the great Emperor realm, it would be too late. Opportunity, opportunity, she murmured in her heart, but on the surface, everything was normal. She finished the task of the day and didn't return until the evening. It seemed that she walked a little faster, and the sharp blades of grass on the side of the path cut a wound on her calf. She screamed in pain and squatted down to check it. She found that it was only a very shallow wound, and her expression suddenly relaxed. She was about to stand up and rush home, but her eyes suddenly froze on the withered and black curled-up grass. Many grass in winter were frozen like this, but she was clearly cut just now. The curled-up and black grass was very soft. How could it be so sharp? Blood poison? Although her cultivation was isolated by the illusion, her talent was still there. Su Li's eyes were faintly bright, but she didn't immediately confirm it. It was getting dark. If she didn't go back, her adoptive mother would notice something wrong and come out to find her. Back in the small courtyard, Su Li handed the copper coins to her adoptive mother, as usual. Then she washed her hands by the well and returned to the dining table to pick up the chopsticks. How was the marketplace today? Her adoptive mother's eyes were full of gentleness. If Su Li didn't see it, it would be difficult to perceive the malice in her eyes. She just needed to complete a test and didn't need to consider the subsequent consequences. How did Duan Hongshun, who was still a child, perceive her malice and escape from the predicament? Su Li couldn't help thinking about it, but she replied as obediently as usual, "Nothing special. I accidentally cut my foot on the way back, but the wound is not deep, so I don't need to bandage it." That's good. I will go to my parents' home tomorrow and come back that night. Stay at home and don't run around, okay? Yes, mother. Well, that night, Suli fell asleep and closed her eyes. Her thoughts became active. Her parents' home? She probably didn't go to her parents' home. She went back to the sect, or someone else came to find her, but it was inconvenient to meet her in the courtyard. Anyway, she would monitor the courtyard tomorrow, but it couldn't be ruled out that she had someone to monitor her. She still needed to be careful to test the effect of the blood poison. She repeatedly thought about the plan for tomorrow in her mind until it was clear. Then she fell asleep. The next morning, her adoptive mother left the courtyard as expected. Suli got up, dressed, and patiently watered the vegetable field. Then she sat in the central room for a moment and sighed to herself. It's so boring. It's a pity not to see the lion trick in the marketplace today. Since my mother will come back at night, I will sneak out and come back at noon. No one will find it, right? Suli muttered, and her eyes became brighter and brighter. Finally, she plucked up her courage, took out a few copper coins, and sneaked out of the courtyard. After a while, a black shadow appeared in the quiet courtyard and whispered, I didn't expect that the master has the potential to be a good wife and mother. She dotes on this little bastard so much. Not bad. After saying that, the black shadow returned to the room. He had monitored Duan Hongshun for several years, and there was nothing unusual at all. The master made a wrong decision and gradually lost his patience. His mind gradually turned to other things. Soon, this girl would be killed by the master. It was okay for him to be lazy occasionally. After Suli came to the marketplace, she didn't feel that she was being watched after several attempts. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. First, she went to the clothing shop to buy a robe and put it on. Then she stepped into the most luxurious attic in the center of the Ruruay Lane, which she had never entered before. After this month's observation, she found that the operation mode of Ruruay Lane was surprisingly similar to that of Tainyek attic. Therefore, she was more or less confident this time. As soon as she stepped into the gate, a female practitioner with a delicate face greeted her. Seeing that Suli covered her face, she didn't care and bowed gracefully. Guest, why are you here? Suli stretched out her hand and put the porcelain bottle containing the blood in her palm. She said softly, help me test the power of the poison in it. I can give you some of my blood as a reward. Hearing that, the smile on the female practitioner's face faded a little, but she was still polite. Although it was not common to test the power of poison, it was indeed the business of Ruruay Lane. She carefully put away the porcelain bottle and bowed. Guest, please wait a moment. Suli nodded gently and said lightly, don't touch it directly with your hands. Otherwise, your cultivation won't last until your elders come to rescue you. She still had good eyesight. Naturally, she could see that the female practitioner in front of her was just in Juji realm. If the power of her blood poison hadn't weakened, she could make the female practitioner disappear if she touched it. The female practitioner's hand trembled slightly. She looked solemn and quickly put away her previous contempt. Senior, thank you for reminding me. She had despised Su Li's young voice and the physique of a mortal. But since Su Li could see her cultivation, she couldn't be immortal. It was she who couldn't see through the cultivation of the senior. Thinking of this, the female practitioner dispelled the idea of testing casually. She knocked on the door of a supervisor with the porcelain bottle. What's the matter? A quiet voice came from the door. The female practitioner took a deep breath. The power of the poison may be above Jindan realm. Squeak! The door was opened from inside. An old man came out with a little surprise on his face. This place is remote, but there is poison equivalent to that of Jindan realm. Where's the poison? It's in my hands. Then come with me. Yes, supervisor. The female practitioner nodded and followed him. She was anxious. She didn't know much about poison, but now she faintly realized that maybe she had exaggerated too much. A moment later, the old man and the female practitioner came to the underground place where the demon was imprisoned. As a branch of Rui Lane, it couldn't afford to raise a poison master. The method of testing poison was very primitive, which was to let the demon try the poison. The old man went straight to the dungeon where the demon in Jindan realm was imprisoned. This demon in Jindan realm was obviously starved. Its eyes were red, and it had lost its mind. The old man looked slightly serious. He took out a piece of spirit beast meat and carefully dripped a drop of Su Li's blood on it. Seeing that there was no change in the meat, he frowned slightly but didn't say anything. He threw the meat into the cage. The demonic beast immediately jumped up and swallowed it in one gulp. Its eyes regained some clarity, and it spoke in the human language. "Human, what did you feed me? I feel much better now." The old man was expressionless. He turned his head and glanced at the female practitioner. The female practitioner suddenly panicked. When she was about to explain, she suddenly heard the scream of the demon. It melted like ice meeting fire. In the blink of an eye, it became a pool of blood. The female practitioner's panic stopped abruptly, and her eyes were full of fear. She couldn't help trembling when she thought that she had a whole bottle of horrible poisonous blood in her hands. The old man had seen the world, but the porcelain bottle in his hand couldn't help but tremble. "Hurry up! Invite the senior who provided this poison to the Tianzi room on the top floor." Chapter 668. Su Li was sitting in the lobby on the first floor. She was not sure whether her blood poison had been weakened. The only thing she was sure of was that even a junior emperor was helpless against her poison. Even if it had been weakened a lot, it was very likely to reach the effect of killing someone in Jinan realm. After waiting for a long time, Su Li quickly saw the female practitioner who had just left, and the fear in her eyes had not faded. Her mind immediately became incomparably tranquil. "Senior, the steward invites you to the top floor for a detailed discussion." Su Li was not afraid at all and chuckled. "It seems that the effect is good." It was more than good. The female practitioner's face was full of a sincere smile, and she respectfully led the way in front. After receiving such a senior, her reward might exceed her expectation. After a while, they came to the top floor. The steward had been waiting here for a long time. At this moment, seeing Su Li's costume, he didn't care and quickly got up to greet her. "I am the steward of the Fang-launching branch of Rui's shop. Nice to meet you, senior." Su Li said and stepped over the bowing old man. She said casually, "Get up. How is the effect of the poison?" Seeing Su Li's attitude, the old man was not surprised at all. This was the attitude of a strong person. If Su Li showed her cleverness in front of her adoptive mother, the old man would definitely doubt whether she was lucky to pick up the bottle of poison. Although the old man couldn't sense any cultivation of Su Li at this moment, how could she be immortal with such a graceful bearing of a high position for a long time? "Senior, there is no poison master in our branch, so we can only test it on monsters. Just now, a monster in Jindan realm only swallowed a drop of your blood poison. It only lasted for a few breaths, and then it died violently. Even the corpse couldn't be found. If you want to continue the test, I'm afraid you need to go to a bigger branch." After answering, the old man's heart beat like a drum. Even he was not satisfied with the test result. If the senior got angry, it doesn't matter. Jindan realm is enough. Su Li picked up her own porcelain bottle on the side of the table, unplugged the stopper, filled the empty wine cup with half a cup, and handed it to the old man. The old man was so scared that he stepped back and hit the cabinet. His face suddenly turned pale. Su Li chuckled. "What do you think of the reward of your shop?" The old man wiped the sweat off his forehead, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and forced a smile. "Too much. Even the lives of 1,000 golden core stage beasts were not worth this cup." This old man does not dare to be greedy. If senior has any other instructions, this junior will definitely not refuse. "You're quite perceptive." Su Li's tone was still casual. "I do have a little favor to ask you." The old man was startled. He collected his thoughts and said respectfully, "Senior, please speak." Night fell. Su Li sat at the dinner table and waited for her adoptive mother to come back with her little feet crossed. She was hungry alone, but she still waited. She stared at the gate of the courtyard motionlessly with her clear eyes. When it was almost midnight, the wooden door quietly opened and his foster mother walked out of the darkness. Her cold and solemn expression was somewhat frightening. Mother, you're back! Su Li's eyes lit up. She immediately jumped down from the stool and trotted all the way to hug her foster mother. Zhang Yueru stared blankly at the cold dishes on the table. You're still waiting for me? You didn't eat? Su Li bit her lips and nodded aggrievedly. Mother, you come back so late. I'm starving. Zhang Yueru's eyes flashed with emotion, but it was soon covered by coldness. How could the path of immortality be tied down by love? She had found a way out. It was time to say goodbye to this child. Thinking of this, Zhang Yueru showed a gentle smile. She picked up Su Li and walked to the room. It's my fault. Let's have supper together. The Last Supper, she added in her heart. Seeing the little girl in her arms nodding cheerfully, her smile faded gradually. Damn lucky chance. She had wasted 5 years of her life. Damn it. Su Li quickly heated up all the dishes and brought them to the table. The dishes were steaming hot. It smells so good. Zhang Yueru squinted her eyes with a smile, full of praise. You won't suffer a loss if you have a full meal before you go on the road. Su Li heard her foster mother's praise and immediately grinned. She picked up a piece of duck blood for Zhang Yueru and said, Mother, taste my cooking. Okay, you also eat. The fragrance lingered in the room. It was a warm picture of a loving mother and a filial son. The smell of duck blood floated in the oil, salt, sauce, and vinegar. The servant hiding in the dark couldn't help but frown. Practitioners' 5 senses were magnified, and they hated food made of blood the most. They didn't know how the master endured for 5 years. Su Li held the bowl and took a bite of duck blood. Seeing that her foster mother had eaten the whole piece of duck blood, she couldn't help but smile more. Girl, why are you giggling? Zhang Yueru picked up some food for Su Li. She thought that she had a conscience among practitioners. If it were other practitioners, she would just kill them. She didn't care too much. Seeing that Zhang Yueru ate a lot of food, Su Li stopped smiling and sighed. It would be nice if you were my real mother. Silly child. Zhang Yueru wanted to put down the bowl and chopsticks and touch Su Li's head. Suddenly, she frowned and her hands trembled. Crash! The bowl in her hand fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. In her blurred eyes, she saw Su Li was still smiling. If you were my mother, I wouldn't have poisoned you. Bastard! Zhang Yueru screamed and turned into a pool of blood in the blink of an eye. Su Li sat at the table and tapped her fingers. Her voice was calm. Okay. In the cold wind, the old man walked over with a complicated look. At this moment, he was sure that the little girl in front of him had no cultivation, but she talked like an old monster who had just possessed a little girl. Since Zhang Yueru was dead, of course, he wouldn't meddle. Instead, he looked more respectful. Senior, the flying demon beast is ready. We can go to the transportation hub, Pingshan City, immediately. Well done. Su Li got up and walked to him. She pointed behind her. Clean it up. I don't want anyone to know my whereabouts. The old man became more reverent. He waved his hand, and several figures entered the room. Soon, there was a scream. What about the people of the Jean family? There was a touch of worry in the old man's eyes, but he still asked, they are the first cultivation family in Fonglong City. It is not convenient for us to take action. Su Li was calm. She waved her sleeves and walked out of the courtyard. Let's go. I don't have much time. The old man breathed a sigh of relief and quickly followed her. A moment later, Su Li sat on the flying demon beast and grasped the rope tightly. If she guessed right, whoosh! The flying demon beast spread its wings and flew into the sky. At the moment when it took Su Li away from Fonglong City, everything in front of it was broken, including the mount. Su Li was not flustered because at this moment, she had already recovered all her cultivation and stood in the air. As long as she left Fonglong City, the illusion could be broken immediately. Her guess was right. She looked around, but all was pure white. There was no exit. What are you looking for? A blurry figure suddenly appeared. Is this the exit? Su Li's pupils shrank. She took a step back and bowed her head. Senior Duan. If she guessed right, the person in front of her was the so-called Star Lord, Duan Hongchen. I didn't want to come to see you. My action will make you noticed by many people. Duan Hongchen's words made Su Li puzzled, but she felt a sense of fear. The descendant of the undead clan and the supreme master of the human clan, you don't seem to know that your existence is very special. You symbolize that the life level of our human clan has been broken. But on the day you were born, you were stolen, and your whereabouts are unknown. Su Li was confused. Was he talking about her? However, the information that I obtained in this world clearly stated that my existence was created by an evildoer by the name of White Demon. As soon as he said this, the blurred figure shook her head and chuckled. In this world, there is no existence that can create you. Even I can't, and I am already standing at the top of the universe. That Mo is the thief. Su Li was shocked. She was almost distracted by the news brought by him. But why would a master of the universe lie to her? For tens of thousands of years, the undead clan and the human clan have not given up looking for you, but I didn't expect that you would be taken to such a remote corner. If you hadn't chosen Chuangxing Path, I wouldn't have been able to find you. You seem to be different now. You are contaminated with the pneuma of the Dead Region clan, and you can use it perfectly. It even overpowers your bloodline of the undead clan. It's weird. Duan Hongchen didn't continue to say more. You seem to be in a bad situation. After seeing me, your situation will be worse. After dealing with this world, you should leave quickly and don't stay. Now let me personally give you the reward for passing the illusion. The blurred figure flickered, and before Su Li could react, it pointed at the center of her eyebrows. In an instant, the majestic and fierce information and energy wrapped her into a ball in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the blurred figure also collapsed and disappeared. After a few breaths, densely packed huge eyes suddenly appeared in the pure white space, as if they were looking for something. But because Su Li was wrapped by the white silk threads, her existence was not seen. Soon, those eyes disappeared with a cold snort. Time passed in a tense situation. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, the entire land of Qingshui Circle was covered by blood-red veins. Feng Huaji also opened his eyes at this moment, and his majestic voice spread through the entire Qingshui Circle along the veins. Creatures of Qingshui Circle, I am Feng Huaji, the old ancestor of Tian's sect. Whether you are a practitioner or a mortal, at this moment, I need to let you know that Qingshui Circle is at the moment of life and death. If this circle is controlled by White Demon, people will be plunged into misery and suffering. I have painstakingly thought of a way, but if I fight alone, the chance of winning is slim. At this moment, I need your help. Back then, I was the lord of the instrument hall of Qingshui Palace, and I had a unique skill in refining weapons. When Feng Huaji mentioned Qingshui Palace, the natural law immediately felt provoked. Countless thunderbolts suddenly fell, and the entire Tian's sect was as bright as daytime. Bai Xiu closed his eyes, but he didn't hear the roar he expected. He opened his eyes slowly and was shocked to see the thunderbolts turned into a dazzling lightning in Feng Huaji's hand. Chapter 669. Feng Huaji actually took away the thunder test. Was the Emperor's strength so horrible? Feng Huaji snorted coldly. He drew a round portal with his right hand, and then threw the lightning in his hand into it. I dare not accept this gift. I give it back to you. As soon as he finished speaking, a round portal appeared above the Life Palace. The violent thunder fell, but it disappeared directly when it approached the Life Palace. Feng Huaji snorted coldly and didn't care much about it. The weapon I refined is under your feet. As long as you are willing to fight for Qingshui Circle, you can pick up the weapon. Mortals can kill those in Zhuji Realm. Those in Zhuji Realm can kill those in Jindan Realm. Similarly, if you pass the test for Junior Emperor, you could be besieged and killed. The spirituality in my blood, net, is the cornerstone for you to use the spiritual weapon. Feng Huaji's voice spread throughout Qingshui Circle. At this moment, all the creatures who had some understanding of the cultivation circle were extremely shocked. In the entire Qingshui circle, mortals were the most common people. What a great undertaking it was to give every mortal the strength to fight with the cultivators. Even Bai Xiu couldn't help but be stunned and speechless for a long time when he heard Feng Huaji's plan. How can we allow others to sleep on the side of our bed? As long as you are willing to pick up the weapon, our power will be thousands or even tens of thousands of times that of White Demon. At this moment, all the creatures in every big region, whether mortals or practitioners, were overwhelmed with emotions. Their eyes gradually focused on the blood veins under their feet. Instead of panic, they were filled with the desire to fight that could set off stormy waves. Finally, an old grand elder of a sect took out an eccentric spiritual spear from the blood veins. At the moment when he touched the spear, he understood how to use it, and his turbid eyes lit up. I'm willing to go through fire and water for Qingshui Circle. All the 81 big regions in Qingshui Circle rose up at the same time. Countless practitioners rushed to the transmission matrix, and countless mortals dared to go with the practitioners. Crazy, crazy. Everyone has gone crazy. Some people were unwilling to pick up the weapon, and their faces were full of panic. How can mortals be the opponents of practitioners? The old monster with this method is a lunatic. But no matter how he tried to persuade him, the young mortal, who was the only one who could see the hope of becoming extraordinary and was filled with fantasies, still entered the teleportation formation without looking back. Bai Xiu's face turned pale and his voice trembled. Many people will die like this. Mortals, cultivators, they will all die. Feng Huaji, you are not saving Qingshui Circle, but harming it. How can there be no deaths in war? Feng Huaji's face was expressionless as he looked away. A naive person like you is destined to fail. I am the real candidate to avenge the Green Water Palace. Bai Xiu was speechless and choked with sorrow. Even if it's hatred, it shouldn't hurt the innocent. Feng Huaji, you have truly turned into a devil. If you don't go crazy, you won't become a demon. Feng Huaji's gaze pierced through space and seemed to be able to see the teleportation array light up continuously. I've said it long ago. I only care about revenge. Everything else doesn't matter. In the Life Palace, the master of Xingtian Ancestral Temple and others were finally summoned by Bai Ming. You've all seen what the Tianna sect has done. Bai Ming picked at his fingernails and raised his head with a hint of a smile. Interesting. Feng Huaji actually thought of such a method. My Lord Fate Ancestor, how should we deal with it? Ling Kuan, the master of Xingtian Shrine, stepped forward and took the initiative to ask. Recently, he always felt that Bai Ming's attitude towards him was very strange, but he couldn't tell the specifics. Kill. Bai Ming's movements changed. He crossed his hands and glanced sharply at the three leaders of holy sects. This time, Huanxing Hall and Ankuei Valley will be the assistants. Ling Kuan, you will be the commander-in-chief. The status of Xingtian Shrine should be like this. Ling Kuan's body shook, and his eyes lit up. He quickly knelt down. I dare not. I will follow your orders and fight with all my strength. Then go and assemble. Under Feng Huaji's instigation, you don't have much time to prepare. Yes. Chu Lianqing listened silently on the side, and his mind slowly sank. Bai Ming really wants to bury the entire Xingtian Shrine in the war, but what is his purpose? In just a few hours, more and more practitioners and mortals appeared in the sanctuary. The Tianna sect had long been prepared and sent all elders to command the army. Each elder had the strength of nature's test. At this moment, they held a spiritual weapon with bloody meridians. They were like Junior Emperor, who was enough to lead a practitioner army. The war broke out as expected, right in the center of Qingshui Circle, on the plain between the four holy sects. The sound of fighting filled the sky, and the blood flowed like a river. The war situation was still anxious at the beginning, but as more and more reinforcements came from various regions, and mortals used spiritual weapons that could attack practitioners in Zhuji realm remotely and kill them with one blow, the casualties of the army led by Xingtian Shrine increased greatly, and they gradually couldn't hold on. Ling Kuan had a headache counting casualties every day. They couldn't get the spiritual weapon with bloody meridians, so their overall strength was lower. If it went on like this, they would be killed by the army of the Tiana sect in less than a month. At that time, the army would come to the Life Palace, and he wouldn't be able to atone for his crime even if he died 10,000 times. Every practitioner of our Xingtian shrine has walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It's easy for one to fight against 10 people. Why are they so weak? This was what Ling Kuan couldn't figure out the most. But he looked around and couldn't find anyone to investigate this matter. Ling Kuan's eyes were gloomy. He looked at the bloody battlefield for a long time without saying a word. The flames of war burned for half a year. In the third month, Ankuei Valley and Huangxing Hall all took part in the war with 17 holy sects. The poison of Chu Lianqing finally broke out at this moment, and the blood poison spread. Every time a person died in Xingtian Shrine, dozens or even more practitioners would be buried with him. The situation was reversed little by little. 27 holy sects finally couldn't hold back. Regardless of Baishou's warning, they all joined the war. The Life Palace side was once again suppressed. The more turbulent war dyed the entire Qingshui Circle red. Every day, countless creatures died. In the empty hall, Bai Ming looked at the picture in the small golden tower, and his smile gradually became arrogant. That's good. Fang Huaji, you are really my benefactor. Bai Ming laughed heartily, got up and tidied his clothes. Under the small golden tower, a hole was silently cracked open. He stepped down and walked for a long time. Finally, a huge fiery red boundary core came into view. Sensing the coming person, a ferocious face immediately appeared on the fiery red boundary core, and the scream full of hatred echoed in the space. Inferior race, you and devour Jie clan. My clansmen will not let you go. Bai Ming looked at the face with joy. Do you see? The creatures you nurtured are killing each other and going to perish. Your natural law will also be in my hands. It will obediently destroy all the people who provoked this war. Speaking of this, Bai Ming clenched his palm, and the black ink poured into the boundary core from nothingness and slowly infiltrated it, making it difficult for the face to appear. White Demon, you won't succeed, you won't. The boundary core barely maintained its form, and its voice was crazy. Have you forgotten? That anomaly that you brought, she's your nemesis. But you are afraid that I will get out of trouble, so you dare not leave here for a long time. This is your biggest weakness. Suli, her background is much more powerful than you think. You will fail. You will absolutely fail. Noisy. Bai Ming was expressionless and clenched his palm. The boundary core suddenly screamed, and the face collapsed. It seems that I am crazy to think that you will beg for mercy from me. It doesn't matter if you offer your life core. Bai Ming turned and left. When I destroy 90% of the foundation of this circle, you will collapse, and the Chimo circle will also be destroyed. I can harvest 2 boundary cores at a time, which is enough to make up for the loss. Time was ruthless. It passed in the flames of war, in the sorrow and tragedy. It was the 9th month of the war. One day in this month, Fang Mu's eyes were red. He raised his head numbly, but found that there was no one in front of him to kill. The army of the Life Palace had been killed. Did we win? He opened his mouth in a daze. Looking at the blood-red field, he choked with sobs. In this war, there was no winner. Too many people died. Many familiar elders of the Tiana sect died in front of him. Even the grand elders of the 27 sects died because of the blood-poisonous human bombs thrown out by the Life Palace. At this moment, his thoughts started to wander. He had been wondering where the eldest brother was at this time. Reorganize the troops. Sorrow can't change anything. We have to destroy the Life Palace in one go. Fang Huaji's sonorous voice came. Now listen to my command. Go to the Life Palace and win the battle. That's not necessary. A voice suddenly came from the sky. Fang Huaji, I'm kind. I'll let you die in your own sect, okay? A white figure appeared from the twisted space and stood not far in front of Fang Huaji. His face gradually became clear. Who else could it be But Bai Ming. Bai Xiu sighed and closed his eyes. Was the scene in the divination about to appear? The dialogue between the two sides spread throughout Qingshui Circle through the blood-red veins. At this moment, the rest of the practitioners immediately gathered in the Tiana sect. White Demon, you finally stopped being a coward, huh? When Feng Huaji saw Bai Ming, his eyes were full of killing intent. Today is the day you die. Bai Ming tilted his head and looked at Feng Huaji with a smile. No, I show up today to thank you. Feng Huaji snorted coldly. Do you think that I will believe your nonsense? It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Bai Ming's expression was casual and happy. Now, your task is completed. You can die. Feng Huaji's eyes suddenly turned blood-red, and his robe turned into a shadow. Bai Ming didn't dodge and said softly, destroy the world. Boom! Tens of thousands of pure black thunderbolts poured down without warning. In an instant, the mountain gate of the Tiana sect, together with the mountain range, turned into flying ashes. Only the area where Bai Ming was located was protected by Feng Huaji. It only turned into ruins, but didn't turn into powder. Destroy the world, thunder? Bai Xiu sat down on the side, watching the black thunderbolts falling. He was lost in thought. This was the second time he witnessed the destroy the world thunder. 9 months later, Bai Xiu's black hair had turned white, and the wrinkles on his face were like tree bark, full of ravines. Chapter 670. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net there was no pop-up window for free reading. Cough, cough, cough. Feng Huaji fell into ruins, coughing up blood and laughing. It's really a thunder test that even the palace lord can't bear. It's reasonable for me to suffer the thunder of extermination for killing. But your thunder doesn't seem to be so good. It didn't kill me at once. Huh? Bai Ming raised his eyebrows and flicked his fingers. Suddenly, another thunder as thick as a bucket rushed down from the dark clouds, directly turning Feng Huaji's bones into ashes. The laughter stopped abruptly. Feng Huaji died. Bai Xiu didn't hesitate to stare at the bloody veins on the ground. They were still there. Bai Ming frowned slightly. This was indeed beyond his expectation, except for the great emperor, who could support the operation of such a huge vein. Well, just destroy it. Bai Ming was about to destroy the center of the bloody vein. Suddenly, he stopped and took back his hand. He said expressionlessly, Ling Kuan, Chu Lianxing, Yin Lin, you come to clean up the mess. Don't hurt Bai Xiu. Take him into the Life Palace. After saying this, Bai Ming's figure flashed and disappeared. Bai Xiu sighed again. If Bai Ming chose to destroy the vein just now, he would definitely be swept by the killing intent of all the creatures in Qingshui Circle. Within a breath, he would die without leaving any remains. This was the last chance that Feng Huaji got at the cost of his own death. Unfortunately, Bai Mo was too cautious. Whoosh! 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 3 figures appeared on the ruins. Ling Kuan walked in the front and looked a little confused. The war of several months was ended by a blow from Fate Ancestor. But why did it happen after he killed all the disciples of the sect? Didn't you notice it until now? Bai Xiu looked haggard and wrinkled his face with a smile. The purpose of Bai Mo is not to win, but to kill. As soon as he said this, the 3 people had different reactions. Ling Kuan's body shook violently. Chu Lianqing's eyes just changed, and Yin Lin had no reaction. Like you, I understand it too late. If you can explain it before Feng Huaji takes action. It's not too late. Suddenly, the 5th person's voice sounded in the field. Bai Xiu looked back in amazement and saw Feng Yuan standing in the center of the blood vein. He gently put his palm on the blood vein, and his breath soared again from the realm of Junior Emperor. Chu Lianqing, you still have the right to choose. As soon as these words were spoken, Chu Lianqing didn't say another word as his hands turned pitch black and slapped towards Yin Lin's head. This slap was an illusion. Yin Lin reappeared not far away, his brows tightly furrowed as he scolded in a low voice. Chu Lianqing, are you crazy? This sudden change dumbfounded by Xiao and Chu Lianqing. Chu Lianqing chuckled. Thousand-faced demoness. Even though I had already vaguely guessed your identity, I still didn't think of betraying you. Until Fate Ancestor asked me to poison Shengtian Shrine. This old man is very selfish. If one day my sect's disciples were to die like this, I wouldn't be able to bear it. Just because of this? Yin Lin shook his head and chuckled. His appearance changed to that of an old woman. Fool! When Fang Yuan saw the appearance of the old woman, his pupils shrank slightly. Thousand-faced demoness turned out to be the old lady of the Ling Mansion in the reincarnation mirror. Gu Yin? He faintly felt that something was wrong, but his eyes were still firm. He waved his sleeves to set a blood cage in this world, and said in a deep voice, Thousand-faced demoness, no matter who you are, no one can save you today. The old woman snorted coldly and turned into a phantom, trying to break through the cage, but was directly bounced back by the cage. She turned into Su Li again and said with a timid face, Great Emperor, did you become the Great Emperor by relying on the legacy of Feng Huaji? I'm so scared. Feng Yuan's eyes were full of anger. When he waved his sleeves, countless bloody brilliance penetrated the old woman's body. Don't become like her, disgusting. This time, the old woman still turned into a phantom and ran away, leaving a little blood on the ground. When she appeared again, she was beside Ling Kuan, covering her mouth and nose, which were overflowing with blood. Ahem, I thought you wouldn't have the heart to do it. You are not her. Then do you know that she is still alive? Fang Yuan's eyes moved, and he raised his hand expressionlessly. Countless bloody brilliance quickly descended and shrouded Ling Kuan. You talk too much nonsense. Thousand-faced demoness was very angry. Why didn't Bai Ming show up? Thousand-faced demoness, you said that Ling Kuan was naive, but aren't you one of them? If White Demon wants to achieve his goal, we, who occupy the foundation of Qingshui's circle, have to die. Thousand-faced demoness' eyes were full of black lines, and her speed immediately increased to the same level as Fang Yuan. Her voice also became more hoarse, like a night crow. Ah, you're wrong about this. I am not from Qingshui's circle at all. White Demon has no reason to kill me. Bai Xiao was stunned and immediately shook his head. He doesn't show up, which is the best proof. You have been with him for tens of thousands of years, and you know too much. No. Thousand-faced demoness' ferocious face was covered with fine fluff, and a second pair of hands grew from her back. He is my cultivation companion, and he loves me. How could he hurt me? Bai Xiao looked at the horrible appearance of thousand-faced demoness and was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. It turns out that you are more naive than I thought. I will kill you. Crack! Crack! Thousand-faced demoness had 6 pairs of limbs on her back, and 3 pairs of eyes appeared on her face. Her speed soared to the extreme, but when her tentacles penetrated Bai Xiao, they were caught by Fang Yuan and pulled hard. Ah! Thousand-faced demoness screamed and retreated with resentment in her eyes. She came from the starry sky as a thousand-faced spider demon. She was born to change and imitate anyone's breath. But her cultivation talent was very poor. Even if she had lived for tens of thousands of years, she could not break through Junior Emperor and step into the realm of Deshang completion. Until she met White Demon, who gave her hope. But now, Bai Xiao actually said that she was cheated? Ha ha ha. Thousand-faced demoness endured the severe pain, and a twisted smile appeared on her face. Her hands suddenly crossed to make a strange gesture. Your great emperor just used the means left by Feng Huaji. Do you really think you can easily kill me? Blood-killing curse. As soon as she finished speaking, Ling Kuan's body suddenly soared, and his breath soared. In a few breaths, he broke through to Great Emperor. He roared and rushed to the center of the bloody meridian. No, he's going to destroy the meridian. Bai Xiao reluctantly reminded. Fang Yuan's face darkened. He ignored thousand-faced demoness and blocked Ling Kuan, who was demonized by the curse. The two fell into a fierce battle. Thousand-faced demoness gasped and finally no longer hoped that white demon would appear. She quickly set up the altar, flipped her hands, and kept making gestures. Bai Xiu looked at her movements and shouted coldly, "At this point, you still want to help him achieve his goal? Don't be stubborn and harm others and yourself." "Ha ha, Bai Xiu. How do you know that what I am doing now is to help him, not to save myself? I will explain to him face to face. It is not your turn to sow discord. The situation in front of us is actually very easy to solve. As early as a long time ago, we have made preparations." Thousand-faced demoness waved her sleeves, and a pocket-sized mountain appeared out of thin air on the altar. Bai Xiu looked carefully and found it was a pocket-sized version of Shengxian Mountain. He immediately thought of something, and his eyes were full of horror. "Tianjiao list. Haha, go to hell." Thousand-faced demoness laughed wildly and smashed Shengxian Mountain into pieces with one palm. At this moment, blood flowed from the corner of her mouth, and she suffered from the backfire. Fang Yuan, who was fighting fiercely with Ling Kuan, suddenly changed his face. He retreated far away and supported his body with a sword. His blood gurgled down along the flying sword. He was not injured, but his blood was flowing rapidly. His soul seemed to be suddenly missing a piece. The sinful breath of the blood-colored meridian found an outlet to pour out, which made his strength decline rapidly. Fang Yuan screamed unwillingly and rushed to thousand-faced demoness with blood-red eyes. But he was slapped away by Ling Kuan. His body was torn apart, and blood splashed in the sky. The blood-colored cage crashed and broke. Fang Mu's eyes were blood-red. He looked at his hands full of blood, and then looked at the realizations around him. He was in a daze, and his sight was blurred. The world was spinning. This is what's wrong. With a plop, Fang Mu fell to the ground and could not get up again. Like him, all the talents who had participated in the Tianjiao battle over the past tens of thousands of years had the same reaction. They either bled from the 7 apertures of their heads, or died suddenly, or their souls perished, and their bodies collapsed. The foundation of Qingshui Circle disappeared at a faster speed than during the war. "Well done, Gu Yin." Bai Ming calmly looked down at the Heavenly River Sex battle, still smiling. Beside him, there was a page of old paper that had been torn off. It was recorded that the price of casting this curse was that the caster would be dragged into the hell of 9 tribulations and would be tortured forever. He would be the only winner, and he didn't need anyone to share the fruits of victory with him. At this moment, the picture in the Golden Tower suddenly changed, and even his expression suddenly changed. Fang Yuan's inverted body was suddenly caught by a pair of hands. Gu Yin, who was about to escape after casting the spell, suddenly found that there was a transparent cage outside the blood-colored cage. She finally smelled the fear before death. She looked for the curse and stared at the figure of the person. When she was about to cast the spell, she found that her hands suddenly broke and fell to the ground. This scene made her fall into a deep confusion, and she even forgot to cast the spell. "You are here." Bai Xiu looked at the person with relief. "It seems that you have completely integrated the bloodline and become a real emperor. The curse of the 1,000-faced demon girl can't affect you." Ling Li looked serious and silently put Fang Yuan, who was seriously injured and dying, into the reincarnation mirror. There, he could at least die slowly like others. "I'm late." Ling Li's sigh was like crushed sand, melting in the wind and turning into sharp swords, penetrating Ling Kuan, who was roaring and nailing him to the ground. Because of the change of the 1,000-faced demon girl, the curse on him gradually disappeared, revealing his original appearance. "I remember you." Ling Li walked up to him, who was dying. "You are in my memory. You are from the Ling family, an affiliated family of the Qingshui Palace. My mother does come from your family, but she has no blood relationship with you. Did Bai Ming rely on this relationship to let you inherit the fate of the Qingshui Palace?" Ling Kuan's mouth was bleeding, and his eyes were full of hatred. If your father was fair to the Ling family, how could the Ling family turn to the Life Palace? My father died in the hands of your father. You and I are the same generation. Ling Kuan. Ling Li's tone was indifferent. I don't have the memory of that year. But my father's memory tells me that if your Ling family did not rebel, you would be the lord of this realm. Ling Kuan fell into a sluggish state, and then his whole body trembled. You liar! How is it possible? My father's ambition is not in this realm, because my mother is missing. Ling Li seemed to be telling something that had nothing to do with him, and there was pity in his eyes. So, it is you who destroyed your own world. Ling Kuan vomited the bright red visceral blood, widened his eyes, and gradually stopped breathing. I hate. Chapter 671. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign small slash say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Chu Lianqing looked at this scene in silence. He was also one of the accomplices. At this moment, he was at a loss except for silence. Ling Li added a protection to Bai Xiao and flashed to the demon girl who had almost melted into a pile of flesh and blood. He said calmly, "You have been cheated." The face and the flesh and blood showed a relieved expression. I have committed countless sins in my life, and I deserve to die. It's a pity that I can't die with him. What a pity. I will send him down to accompany you. Ling Li looked up at the dispersing dark clouds. He was born in Qingshui Circle and had never slaughtered mortals. The fighting between practitioners could not cause the natural law to send the thunder of doom. In other words, Bai Mo could do nothing to him. Be careful, he must have a backup plan. The face and the flesh and blood gradually couldn't maintain, and the voice was intermittent. Su Li was not created by him, and he is not qualified. Ling Li's eyes were fixed, and then his eyebrows stretched. He nodded slightly to the flesh and blood that had lost the face. Thank you. It's really surprising that you have absorbed your father's bloodline in just 1 year and become a great emperor. At this time, the voice of Bai Ming sounded between heaven and earth. A white figure flashed out and stood in the air. Looking down at Ling Li, Ling Li's eyes suddenly became cold. He waved his sleeves and flew to the same height as Bai Xiao. They looked at each other from a distance. Bai Xiao supported his body and looked at the white figures on both sides. He realized that this was the final picture he had foreseen. It turned out that it was not Feng Huaji who fought with Bai Mo, but Ling Li. But what he saw was clearly a failure. Even Ling Li, who became a great emperor, was not a match for Bai Mo. What about Su Jiuzhou? Where was Su Jiuzhou at this moment? In the nothingness, Ling Li stared at Bai Mo coldly. After a moment of confrontation, his figure suddenly disappeared, and a shocking sword strike suddenly came. Bai Mo's eyes were full of sarcasm. He said softly with a casual posture, "The natural law blesses me." The huge golden sword shadow chopped 3 inches away from his head, as if it encountered an absolute barrier. Under the shock, it burst directly. Ling Li's pupils suddenly shrank. Before he spoke, he saw Bai Mo smiling at him and spitting out 2 words that were engraved in the depths of his soul. Destroy the world. Boom! Under the clear sky, the black thunder snake didn't need to be prepared, and it went straight into the void. Ling Li, who was black all over, staggered out, and his face showed unprecedented horror. Surprised? You have a lot of questions. Why can I send down the apocalyptic thunder tribulation on you? White Demon's body turned and rose higher into the sky. Black lightning spun around him like the most obedient pet. He squinted his eyes and smiled. Gradually, it turned into a loud laugh, a wild laugh. You guys are right about one thing. We came too late. It's all thanks to Feng Huaji. If it weren't for his leadership, the creatures in Qingshui Circle would die in large numbers, and I wouldn't be able to tilt the authority of the natural law. At this moment, the natural law doesn't need any rule because I am its rule. As Bai Mo said, he leisurely struck Ling Li with lightning as thick as a bucket, which directly smashed Ling Li's flesh and blood. If it weren't for the fact that his bloodline was far more powerful than Feng Huaji's, he would have been annihilated at the moment. Even so, he would die directly like Feng Huaji if he held on for a while. Now his soul was in chaos, and he could no longer concentrate on thinking about the way to save himself. Ding! When his soul was in chaos, a crisp sound suddenly came through his ears. His eyes became clear, and he saw the reincarnation mirror falling into the stone crack. The black lotus hanging on the handle of the mirror hit the stone and made a crisp sound. Wong, and everyone, he moved his twitching body painfully and stubbornly. Regardless of the baptism of the black lightning snakes, he grasped the reincarnation mirror in his hand. The reincarnation mirror emitted a bright light and barely protected Ling Li in it. But under the impact of the black lightning snakes, the mirror soon cracked. Ling Li forcibly got rid of the distracting thoughts and operated a forbidden skill in his father's memory with difficulty. As soon as he made a gesture with his hands, he groaned miserably. It seemed that he was being dismembered. His flesh and blood were all disintegrated and poured into the nothingness. At the same time, an illusory portal appeared in front of him. Seeing this, Bai Mo was shocked and wanted to snatch the reincarnation mirror in Ling Li's hand. But he was directly shaken back by the power of the portal in the void, and his face was faintly pale. I guess right. Apart from the natural law, you are a weakling. Any great emperor can pinch you to death. Bai Xiu laughed out loud. In the reincarnation mirror, there is the foundation of Qing Shui's circle that you want. It is absolutely more than 10%. If they escape far away, the effect of the spell will disappear. Your plan to seize the realm core will be declared a failure. Old thing, you know a lot. Bai Mo's expression was unprecedentedly fierce. He turned his head to look at Chu Lianxing, who was still standing on one side. You go, by any means, take the reincarnation mirror in his hand. Otherwise, you're on Kui Valley. Before Bai Mo finished his words, he was interrupted by Chu Lianxing with a smile. My Ankwe Valley has a successor in the reincarnation mirror. Even if you kill everyone in the valley, I will not stop you. And Chu Lianxing's palms turned dark and suddenly rushed to Bai Mo. I still want to stop you. Bai Mo frowned and drove the annihilation thunder to smash Chu Lianxing into flying ashes, but it also inevitably gave Ling Li a chance to breathe. The speed of his gestures suddenly accelerated, and the bones of his whole body also turned into powder and flew into the door. It was only a weak soul that kept him casting the spell. In exchange for the physical body of the great emperor, the door of the void quickly solidified. In just a breath, it was completely solidified. The door opened wide, and the mysterious Numa came through the void. Seeing this scene, Ling Li showed such a relieved smile and used the last strength to throw the reincarnation mirror into the door. Dad! 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 No! Dad! I'm calling you! Dad! The space in the reincarnation mirror was full of dark red blood. Because of the curse of the Tianjiao list, no one was spared. Even through a mirror, they just died a little slower. In this space, the only one who could see the outside world was Su Buwang. He saw the tragedy of the outside world and Ling Li destroying his physical body. His body trembled violently. How could he still be reserved? He shouted crazily into space, over and over again. Unfortunately, the reincarnation mirror was too weak to transmit his voice to Ling Li's ears. Boom! The door was closed. Bai Mo's face was as black as ink. He stared at Ling Li, whose soul was about to dissipate. The high-pitched voice full of blood and hatred spread throughout Qing Shui's circle. Damn you! Ling Li's thoughts gradually dispersed, and his gradually cold soul could no longer respond to the anger of Bai Mo. After this battle, if Bai Mo wanted to achieve his goal, he had to at least wait for Qing Shui's circle to recover. Unfortunately, he failed to defeat him in the end. In the end, he didn't wait for her. No, you waited for her. The cold soul was suddenly wrapped in warmth. Ling Li opened his eyes in astonishment and saw a pair of eyes as gentle as water. The tenderness in them was so strong that it couldn't be melted. Li, his mind trembled, but he found that he could no longer call the name with all his strength. Su Li shook her head gently, hugged his soul, and kissed his transparent lips gently. A deep kiss. The soul dissipated and turned into light spots. But when Su Li reached out and grabbed, it condensed into a light ball. She threw it into the door that had not been completely closed. After doing all this, Su Li's expression returned to indifference. She looked up at Bai Mo, who was no longer calm. The coldness in her calm eyes almost froze Bai Mo. It's time to send you to the place where you should go. Bai Mo's crazy thoughts were completely awakened by the fear and trembling. He didn't understand. It had only been a few months, but the woman in front of him gave him the feeling that she was a completely different person from the time he met in Xian House. No, if Su Li was like his kind before, now Su Li seemed to be a higher level of life than him. It made him feel that no matter what he did, the result would be in vain. Bai Mo kept smiling. Do you think you can fool me with a few words? Destroy the world. The black thunder was like black ink, drowning the whole world and washing out an abyss of only tens of thousands of miles. Bai Mo sensed that Su Li's breath disappeared. He was about to laugh, but he saw Su Li holding Bai Xiao and walking out calmly in the thunder. Su Bai, she said softly, and then saw a young man shining with five-color brilliance walk out from behind her. He stretched out his hand, and a five-color cage fell from the sky, imprisoning Bai Mo in it. Shrouded by the light of the thunder of tranquility, Bai Mo immediately screamed. His flesh and blood fell off, which was extremely miserable. Sister, he is very weak. I almost killed him. Su Bai was scared. If such a bad guy died easily, his sister would be angry. Su Li listened to Bai Mo's scream, which seemed to be the most pleasant sound in the world. She smiled, but saw Bai Ming in the cage suddenly twitch, kneeling on the ground and shouting anxiously, "Eldest brother, it's me. Let me out. Bai Mo's soul has been purified. I'm out. Ask her to stop. If she continues, I will die." Bai Xiao's old body trembled. Seeing Bai Ming's clear eyes, the corners of his mouth immediately began to tremble. Su Li was expressionless. Without saying anything, she waved her hand to disperse the cage. Bai Ming was immediately saved. He walked to Su Li with fear and knelt down. "Thank you for saving my life, Senior. Otherwise, it would be difficult for me to escape from the clutches of the devil in my lifetime." "Brother, it's really you." Bai Xiao burst into tears and was about to step forward. Bai Ming also approached with an excited expression, but just as he was about to touch Bai Xiao, a strange smile appeared on his face, and his body exploded. "Ha ha ha!" Wild laughter pierced through the dark clouds. "My dear brother, you are so gullible. I have to thank you for saving my life. And Su Li, although I failed this time, it doesn't mean that I can't make a comeback. Do you think I will really believe your nonsense?" Su Li interrupted his nonsense, and her eyes were cold. "I just want to confirm whether you will have a second shelter." So, Su Li's eyes flashed, and her figure suddenly disappeared. She appeared in the hall of the Life Palace and went straight to the small golden tower. Bai Mo was shocked and angry, and immediately sent down the devastating thunder. Su Li's lips curled up. She only wrapped herself in colorful light and let the Life Palace turn into an abyss under the black thunder. Crack! The sound of breaking rang in Su Li and Bai Mo's ears, like a song of death, which made Bai Mo, who had incarnated the natural law, fall into extreme panic. He was bewitched by Su Li just now. She actually bombarded the boundary core with the natural law, and the seal of the boundary core was broken. Su Li actually knew the existence of the boundary core. He was not as simple as the original body said, and the original body regarded him as a sacrificial pawn. Why? At this moment, Bai Mo figured everything out, but soon he had no idea. He, who devoted himself to the natural law, was like a turtle in a jar. The boundary core, which was full of hatred for him, could annihilate him in an instant. Undead clan. The voice of the boundary core came into Su Li's mind. "I already know about my sister's situation. Although you are the natural enemy of our clan, it does not prevent us from showing respect to you. Su Li nodded gently, looking at the abyss disappearing under the influence of the boundary core and the gradually recovering nimbus. She said softly, I will leave this circle soon. You don't have to worry. Thank you for your understanding. Your existence really makes me afraid. The voice of the boundary core faded away and no longer disturbed Su Li. Su Li turned around and fell from the nothingness. She came to Bai Xiu's side with a faint smile and a gentle tone. How do you feel? I am really going to die this time. Bai Xiu chuckled. This old man was muddle-headed again and almost made a big mistake. Too many people had died in this battle. I can't understand your realm. Even if you can save me, I don't want to. I should go down to atone for my sins. Su Li listened quietly to Bai Xiu's last words without saying a word. Before the thousand-faced demon girl died, she said that your life was not created by Bai Mo, and he was not qualified. You can go outside Qingshui's circle to find your origin. I will. Su Li had a response this time. Bai Xiu smiled with tears and closed his eyes with relief. Next, do what you want to do. After saying this, the breath of the old man disappeared. His soul scattered into light spots and went into reincarnation. Su Li buried Bai Xiu on the spot and stood still for a moment. Suddenly, her figure turned into a mysterious light and disappeared in Qingshui's circle. At the door of a high-end restaurant in Jianghai City, Ling Li wore a suit and opened the door helplessly. When the waiter saw his face, his eyes immediately brightened. He approached and asked, Sir, do you have an appointment? Yes. Ling Li pulled his tie uncomfortably and took out his mobile phone from his pocket. He looked up and said, Number 086. Sir, please come with me. Ling Li stepped forward with a headache. Today was the 31st day since he returned to the Cerulean Star and the second day since he was released from the mental hospital. All this came from the fact that his mother didn't believe that he had a wife and a grown-up son. Tens of thousands of years in Qingshui's circle, but 2 years have passed here. Is it because of Einstein's theory of relativity? Ling Li thought about it and had a headache. In order to cure his illusion, his mother immediately began to arrange a blind date after he was discharged from the hospital. In order not to be sent to the mental hospital, he had to bite the bullet and come here. He could only secretly hope that his performance was bad enough to directly ruin the blind date. With this idea, Ling Li sat down under the guidance of the waiter. When he looked up, his helpless look turned into astonishment and dullness. The woman sitting opposite shook the wine glass in her hand and chuckled as before. What? Your son is almost 1,100 years old. You still come to a blind date? The red wine in the woman's hand suddenly turned black, and her tone was full of teasing. It took me a long time to find you. Otherwise, I will poison you to death. With tears in his eyes, Ling Li smiled embarrassedly. It's all up to you. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.